So it finally happened. I'm finally caught up with Detective Conan. I watched all the episodes of the series proper, no specials or OVAs, and all the movies. So you know what that means. That's right, it's time for my totally objective ranking of every single Detective Conan movie, based on how much I enjoyed them. Whew, that's a mouthful. Gotta work on that title. Let me just preface this by saying that the Detective Conan movies are some of my favorite movie series I've had the pleasure of watching. True, not all of them are equally good, but more on that later. Collectively, they are still one of the best long-running movie series currently available. They're what you get when you combine the action and stunts of Mission Impossible, the crime mystery case solving of Sherlock Holmes, and the style and gadgets of James Bond movies. And yes, it's as awesome as it sounds. So yeah, I'm gonna be going through every Detective Conan movie, giving a brief rundown of them, saying what I liked or didn't like about each one, and then rank them according to how much I enjoyed watching them, compared to one another. And of course, doing all that in a single video would be a slog for everyone involved, so it's gonna be split into multiple parts, like 4 at least. And with that being said, let's get right into it. We'll of course be following the chronological release order, so starting us off is the first movie, The Time-Bombed Skyscraper. It starts with the usual crew of characters in the middle of solving a murder case and establishing the formula used in the show when dealing with cases, followed by an intro sequence that gives a rundown of the important events and characters that happened in the show up to the release of the movie. And all the movies have that, so even if you don't follow the show, you can still watch the movies with minimal confusion. And I love the older movies intro, because look at that face. It's like those derp face memes from a while back. Hilarious. Anyway, after the intro sequence, we jump back to Conan talking to Ron with his Shinichi voice and asking her if she would like to go to a fancy tea party he was invited to but can't attend because he's out of town. To which she agrees and invites him to go to the movies with her in a week because his birthday is coming up. He doesn't even get the chance to decline because of Ron hanging up on him to go make dinner, so the date is set and now he has to worry about how to get out of that situation cause he can't go in his current state. They then go to the tea party, where they meet the owner of the mansion it's held at. Conan charms him with his smarts, so he gives them a tour of the mansion, and we skip ahead to the day of Ran's and Shinichi's date. But it wouldn't be a Detective Conan movie without something getting in the way. So somebody contacts Shinichi, warning him about bombs he placed around the city, and challenges him to find them and stop the damage they would cause. So now, on top of worrying about his date with Ran, Conan has to worry about a serial bomber setting up bombs in the city. He eventually finds the culprit, who then tells him about the final bomb that is in the same place he and Ran were supposed to go on their date. And with Ran being trapped there because of smaller bombs sealing all exits, Conan must walk her through disarming the bomb. But will they be successful?
We'll find out on the next exciting episode of Dragon Ball Z!
And that's the gist of the movie. It does a pretty good job of introducing the characters and their dynamic to the newcomers while not boring the pre-existing fans with too much setup. The action and set pieces are clear and pretty good looking, helped by the movie quality animation. And the bombing case, coupled with Conan's date with Ran and his fear of disappointing her, make for a compelling watch. Sure, the culprit is so predictable a child without the brain of a 17-year-old could figure out who it is. But this movie leans more into the crime thriller territory, so if you go into it expecting a crime mystery, you're gonna be disappointed. Other than that, I'd say it's a very enjoyable movie and a very good first entry to an animated movie franchise. I wouldn't necessarily put it on the same pedestal as the first Pokemon movie, but it's not far off, and as such, it serves as a good starting reference point to the ranking of other movies in the franchise. The second Detective Conan movie, The 14th Target, is a standard murder mystery, and the targets of the murder are all people connected to the detective Mori Kogoro in some way, and they all have the character for a number from 1 to 13 in their name and are targeted in the reverse order of the numbers. The first few attempts only result in the wounding of the victims, and one is stopped by Conan. And it all culminates in a sea resort all the remaining targets were invited to. Naturally, the police and Conan and the gang are all present to make sure the targets are safeguarded. But of course someone bombs the place, so the climax is them escaping the sinking building and fighting the killer. As I said, this is a standard murder mystery in line with the majority of cases handled in the show. The culprit is not predictable and is masked in the first few appearances, so he's unidentifiable at the start. And there are clues to his identity sprinkled around everywhere in the second half of the movie if you're sharp enough to notice them. We also get some backup information about Kogoro and Eri and why they split up, and it's a really enjoyable movie overall. But the pacing is kinda slow at parts, and the animation looked a bit worse than the first movie at times, so I'd say I still enjoyed the first movie more. So this one goes a step down on the list. The third Detective Conan movie, The Last Wizard of the Century, marks the long-awaited movie debut of everyone's favorite magician thief, Kaito Kid. And the movie wastes no time in hyping him up. Right at the start of the movie, he takes a breather on Ayumi's balcony, probably causes Ayumi's sexual awakening, and escapes into the night from a horde of angry policemen chasing after him. He also leaves a note that indicates his next target and the time at which he will strike. This time, the target is the newly discovered 51st Fabergé egg, which is in the possession of Sonoko's family, so of course they would hire Kogoro to guard the egg. And since the egg will be displayed in Osaka, Eiji also makes his movie debut, but sadly he's not in the movie for long. And there are also some other characters that are after the egg. They either want to buy it, or in the case of the Russian representative, ask for the egg to be returned to Russia by donating it to a Russian museum, and they will all play an important role in the movie. Anyway, Kaito Kid manages to take the egg from under the police's nose, but he is shot by a mysterious figure while escaping and is forced to leave the egg behind. The egg is then transported back to Tokyo by ship, and we are introduced to another character, the great-granddaughter of the egg's maker, who claims the blueprints she found in her family's possession are different from the egg the Suzuki family has. This leads to the discovery to a hint for another egg's location in the old castle the egg's maker also constructed. But then a murder happens on the ship and the police also get involved in the case. And Conan fears that Inspector Shiratori may discover his secret identity when he presents clues that the culprit is a wanted criminal named Jackal, that has an interest in items connected to the Romanov imperial family and who shoots his victims in the right eye. So now he has to worry both about the killer in their midst as well as keeping his identity from being discovered. To be honest, at first I wasn't too keen on this movie, but after rewatching it for the purposes of this video, I liked it way more than I thought I would. The pacing is tight, the action is exhilarating, the mix of mystery, heist and Indiana Jones-esque treasure hunt genres works surprisingly well, and it has the best musical theme so far, so I'm comfortable with placing this movie above the first one on the enjoyment scale. The fourth Detective Conan movie, Captured in Her Eyes, opens up with a flashback of Ran and Shinichi in Tropical Land, sharing a romantic moment before cutting back to present time where a police detective is shot in front of Conan and the detective boys. The killer manages to run away, and the only clues about the culprit's identity are the detective that was shot gripping his left chest pocket with his notebook inside, and that the killer is left-handed. Soon after, another detective is found dead with his notebook in his hand, and at the wedding celebration of Inspector Shiratori's sister, Detective Sato is shot in front of Ran, who caught a brief glimpse of the culprit but loses her memories from the shock. So now Conan has to struggle with the possibility that Ran's memories may not return, meaning she will lose all her memories of Shinichi, and also trying to protect Ran from the killer who wants to get rid of her in case her memories do come back. All the while trying to uncover the culprit's identity from among multiple left-handed suspects that had a connection to the murdered detectives. This is the best Detective Conan movie so far. I was glued to the screen from start to finish. The case is intriguing, it's perfectly paced, the characters are excellently portrayed, and the twist of Ran losing her memory is believably executed. I also really liked Sonoko in this movie. For the brief time she appeared on screen, she showed why she is Ran's best friend. I really have nothing bad to say about this movie, so it goes straight to the top of the list. The fifth Detective Conan movie, Countdown to Heaven, sees the detective boys in the leading role. After a camping trip, they decided to visit the newly erected twin towers in the vicinity, and there they run into Ran, Sonoko, and Kogoro, whose college junior, Tokiwa Mio, who owns the buildings, invited him there. There they meet Mio and other characters that will be important for the plot, like the architect for the buildings, the politician who permitted the building of the towers, a prominent programmer for Mio's company, and Mio's secretary and her art instructor. But they are not the only ones with an eye on the towers, because just a bit later, Gin and Vodka show up. Conan overhears some employees from the company mentioning a black Porsche 356A parked in front of the building, and immediately concludes it's Jin's car and rushes to catch them, but he misses them by a hair. Later that day, the politician they met in the tower is killed in the neighboring tower, and the rest of the people they met there are suspects in the murder, since they were the only ones who knew where he would be that night. The detective boys of course decide to investigate the case, so they go interviewing the suspects, and on the second day of the investigation, they find the programmer guy dead in his apartment, with a broken cup next to him like in the previous murder, so the police conclude it's a serial murder case. Despite the murders, Mio decides to hold the opening ceremony for the towers and invites Kogoro and family and also the detective boys and Professor Agasa, even though a killer is on the loose and may target the event. To top it off, Gin and Vodka catch wind that I, aka Sherry, is going to be at the party, and they plan to make it her wake. Naturally, Conan and the detective boys won't allow that to happen, and what results from that is one of the most heart-pounding, nerve-wracking, brain-teasing, fist-pumping movies I've ever seen. It takes everything the last movie did right and pumps it up a notch, with an intelligent plot, great setups and payoffs, stunts that would make Tom Cruise take notes, and great character writing. This movie understands its characters more than any before it. No action they make or piece of dialogue they have is out of character, and it made the whole experience that much more enjoyable. I was struggling with whether to put this above or below the fourth movie, since I really enjoyed that one, and after some thought, I decided to put it above it after all. They are both great movies, but the fifth one is just slightly more enjoyable. The sixth Detective Conan movie, The Phantom of Baker Street, opens with a young boy working on a computer, and we learn from a news broadcast in the background the boy's name is Hiroki, and he is a boy genius. The news go on how he moved to America with his mother, and after her death, he was in the care of the IT Tsar Thomas Schindler, for whom he was developing an artificial brain that can mature 5 years worth of time in 1 year real time called Noah's Ark. He finishes Noah's Ark and releases it on the internet before going to the roof and committing suicide by throwing himself off the building.
That's pretty dark, yeah. That's dark, yeah, it's pretty dark.
Fast forward 2 years and we are back in Japan, where the usual gang is attending an exhibition for the newest invention in virtual reality video game technology, the Cocoon. And since Shinichi's father and Professor Agasa both contributed to the completion of the Cocoon, Conan and the detective boys are naturally invited to attend. And to no one's surprise, a murder happens at the exposition. Thomas Schindler murdered the Cocoon's project lead, who happened to be Hiroki's father, because he found out why Hiroki committed suicide and he wanted Thomas to come clean about it. But Thomas didn't like the idea, because it would destroy his company and his image. Hiroki's father, however, left a dying message, 3 bloody letters on the computer keyboard, RTJ. Conan, of course, having seen the message, concludes they are initials for a character appearing in one of the Cocoon games he heard about from Professor Agasa, Jack the Ripper. So he uses a badge he got from the professor that designates him as one of the 50 children chosen to test out the Cocoons to get in the game and find some clues. However, the detective boys and Ran also got their hands on a badge so they can accompany him along with some rich brats whose parents helped fund the Cocoon project. But then, Noah's Ark takes over the Cocoons and explains that it wants to reset Japan's broken hereditary power system by frying the brains of the children of influential people in Japan's society unless one of them completes the game. And in the meantime, Shinichi's father is solving the murder in the real world. This movie is pretty out there, even by Detective Conan standards. It's fun to see Conan go back in time to Victorian era London, in a way, and interacting with some of his favorite fictional characters. But the whole thing feels like the side plot to what is going on in the real world, even though most of the runtime is dedicated to it. Not to mention the jarring disparity in the settings of Victorian London and modern day Japan, which kinda clash with one another, making the whole movie seem disjointed. Don't get me wrong, it's still a fun movie, but compared to the excellent ones that came right before it, this one seems kinda lackluster, so I'm gonna put it between the first and second movie on the enjoyment scale. Right, that should do it for this video. No need to drag it on any further. After all, there's still ways to go before I cover all the movies. So until next time, bye!
Oh, Mama.